Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Michelle Woodhill, and I'm the Chief Development Officer at Dr. Susan Love Foundation for Breast Cancer Research. For those of you who are joining us today for the first time, I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce you to our organization. Dr. Susan Love Foundation challenges the status quo to end breast cancer through innovative research and improve the lives of people impacted through education and advocacy. We drive collaborative cutting-edge research with non-traditional partners and shed light on the collateral damage of treatment and actively seek ways to diminish it and interpret science to empower breast cancer patients. Many of the projects the foundation undertakes are designed to increase our understanding of the human breast, where breast cancer starts and what enables malignancy to occur, with the ultimate goal of developing methods to prevent it in the first place. The foundation is also committed to participation in research that has the potential to positively impact the lives of all people who are at risk for or who have breast cancer. Breast cancer happens in people, so research needs to be done on human beings, and that means men, women, non-binary people, everyone that gets breast cancer. Our Love Research Army is committed to encouraging and facilitating breast cancer research in all people, regardless of age, race, gender, sexual identity, with or without a breast cancer diagnosis. We are committed to thoughtfully engaging our members by providing them with ongoing real-time access to an array of studies. Today's webinar is part of our patient education series, where we invite researchers, patient advocates, and experts to provide helpful resources and information for our patient community. Joining us today are Tori Dunlap, MacDonald, and Dan Sherman. Tori Dunlap is an internationally recognized money and career expert and podcast host. After saving $100,000 at the age of 25, Tori quit her corporate job in marketing and founded her first 100K to fight financial inequality by giving women actionable resources to better their money. She has helped over 3 million women negotiate salary, pay off debt, build savings, and invest. Author of the New York Times bestselling book, Financial Feminist, host of the #1 business podcast, Financial Feminist, and co-creator of Treasury, an investing education platform that has over $30 million invested that has been featured in the New York Times business front page. Tori's work has been featured on Good Morning America, The Today Show, NBC, Fortune, BBC, and more. A Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, Tori now travels the world, writing and speaking about personal finance, online businesses, and confidence for women. Thank you so much, Tori, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always an awkward moment where somebody reads your bio in front of you. So thank you for having me in this really, really important conversation. If we want to go ahead and get started, I have a couple brief slides to talk about the impact that you might be feeling about breast cancer and cancer in general, but specifically the kind of consequences that you might be feeling with your money and with your financial standing. So if we can go to that first slide beyond this, the first thing that we need to do when we're thinking about, managing our money during this potentially stressful time, I wouldn't even say potentially, it's got to be a stressful time, is to give yourself so much grace. You weren't taught about money unless you were. I talk about this in my book, is that we grew up in a society that we're more likely to talk about any uncomfortable topic before we'll talk about money. And money is stressful on a good day. Money is extremely stressful receiving some sort of diagnosis. So please know that, unfortunately, this system is extremely confusing. It was not built for you. And money is emotional. We were talking about this before we started this webinar privately behind the scenes, is that money is emotional and psychological. Yet we don't seem to talk about it that way. We either think we are born with a good with money gene or we aren't. We think we're either great with money and Excel spreadsheets and numbers or we aren't. And the truth is, you are learning about money just like any other skill, right? Just like learning a language or, learning how to roller skate. You're not going to be good at it for a period of time, especially during a time of stress or anxiety. So please know that as you're navigating all of these conversations and you're trying to figure out how to get your finances in order, please give yourself so much grace. Shame or judgment has no place in you managing your money. It just makes things worse and it makes you feel like crap. So please know, giving yourself grace during this time in all regards, but specifically for money, is going to be so helpful. Can we go to the next slide, please? In terms of actionable guidance beyond just, being more mindful of how we speak to ourselves and being more mindful of how we're approaching money, it's a great time right now to take stock of your finances. Now, it's, again, very difficult to do this on a normal day because of shame and judgment, right? I have many clients and community members who won't look at their bills for months, right? Because it's a source of stress and unease, especially, again, if we're embarking on some sort of really expensive treatment or trying to figure out, again, how to financially handle all of these bills that are coming your way. It's very easy to just hit the bail button and to just not want to look at it because it's really, really emotionally loaded. But we have to learn to take stock of our finances. So what does this look like? This looks like, again, confronting our bills, but also setting even just the minor financial goals during this time. Being able to say, okay, I know that we have this much in insurance, or we have this much saved. How can we use that during this time, right? It's so important that we start to understand the financial landscape, even if that financial landscape is not what we wanted, right? I was just on a speaking tour for my book, and I asked people in every single city to raise their hand if they felt like they were financially behind. And I'm not exaggerating when I said every single person raised their hand. So know that, again, giving yourself grace, you're not alone in this. And we do need to take stock of what we have and what our priorities are in this next period. So I would look at not only what currently is going on financially in our lives, but what is the plan for the next month, the next quarter, and even the next year. Getting stock of what you currently have and the goals that you're setting for the rest of this period can give you a place to go and a financial plan. So know where your money is, and know what's available to you, and also start setting goals as you progress. This brings me to my final consideration, which is to know your insurance and your benefits. If we want to move to that next slide. This is probably the most important thing, right? Is understanding what is available to you and what resources are available to you. I want to go on a quick tangent. There is no stupid question ever, and especially during times where you're feeling, again, heightened anxiety, heightened stress. I want you to ask any single question that's on your mind to the people who can give you answers. And if they can't give you answers, the question is then, who can give me an answer, right? Please know what is available to you, know what insurance options you have, and know what benefits you have, whether that's through your employer, through, again, your health insurance, through, your state or your community. Please know that these options are available to you, and take diligent notes, ask good questions. And if you are the person who would really, really emotionally benefit from having somebody with you, implore somebody in your life to have these conversations with you as well. I know that, my parents feel much more confident asking questions together because they make decisions together, even if it's just about one person. So, they are both in financial meetings, insurance meetings. So implore, a person that's a loved one and a trusted person in your life to also have these conversations with you if you feel like that would be beneficial. So to recap, first, we want to give ourselves so much grace and understanding as we progress through this time, but really financially in general. Personal finance is difficult to navigate, and my not so conspiracy theory is that they do that on purpose so that you can't progress financially. But please know that you shaming yourself or judging yourself is never helpful. Just give yourself so much grace and understanding as you move through this time. Second is to take stock of your money, to understand what sort of resources have I already accumulated, what flexibility do I have as I move through this period, and really get really honest with yourself about what that looks like. And finally, have a general understanding of your insurance and your benefits, and ask really good questions if you're not sure what that even looks like for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tori. That was very helpful, just in general, as well as for people dealing with a serious illness. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining. I also wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this at the top of the webinar, that please, if you have any questions for our panelists, we do have a Q&A at the end. So please enter in your questions into the chat box found at the bottom of your screen. And like Tori said, there are no stupid questions. So please, if you have any questions, the three of them will be happy to answer them. So next up, we have Molly MacDonald. Molly MacDonald knows what it's like to battle the financial burdens of breast cancer while undergoing treatment to battle the disease. Diagnosed with DCIS in April 2005, the disease was unlikely to take her life, but it took her livelihood as she was unable to start her new job as planned. Her family's already tight budget was immediately overburdened with the addition of a monthly COBRA health insurance payments coupled with the loss of her income. Within months, MacDonald and her family faced the potential for catastrophic financial losses, including the loss of their home. At the end of treatment, when family and friends stopped delivering dinner, MacDonald was forced to use a local food bank to feed her family. When MacDonald's quest to get help was met with blank stares, she became determined to give help to others suffering from lost income as a result of their diagnosis and treatment. In 2006, she founded the Pink Fund, which provides 90 days of non-medical financial aid to cover basic cost of living expenses, such as health insurance, housing, transportation, and utilities. By providing this financial bridge, Pink Fund helps to meet basic needs while decreasing stress levels. These factors improve treatment adherence, improving survivorship outcomes, and quality of life. Since its founding through March 2023, the Pink Fund has made over $6.8 million in bill payments on behalf of breast cancer survivors in active treatment. I mean, that truly is phenomenal. MacDonald holds a degree in journalism from the University of Michigan and considers herself a lived experience expert. Thank you so much, Molly, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So we're going to go through the slides. I do want to say that when we talk about the work that Pink Fund provides in financial toxicity, which is a true side effect of any cancer diagnosis, for us, it's when that lost income collides with high deductibles and copays. And the screen is blank, so I don't know what happened. I can't see the slides. That's when patients and their families begin to make some potentially life-altering decisions around using credit cards, liquidating their IRAs if they have that, putting their home on the market, bringing kids home from college if that's a possibility. And the worst, the most egregious that I heard patients talk about was stopping treatment and going back to work. So you've heard how we help, and we can go to the next slide and talk about a study we did with the University of Michigan, Doctors Reshma Jagsi and Lila Garzai, where they surveyed, there's a qualitative study where the patients identified gaps in the provider setting that would have helped to mitigate or lessen their financial burdens. The first one was incorrect expectations about how treatment would affect their finances. The patient advices, and same thing, request clarity about expected cost and timeline. Now, often the provider is not going to be able to give you that information, but you need to ask if there's a financial navigator on staff in a provider setting or somebody who can really show you what you might be looking at. Some providers have software systems in place like TaylorMed that can tell you more about this, and Dan Sherman can talk to that. The other one is the lack of the provider didn't have any conversations about finances. So think about it this way, your physician is there to treat your illness, not to help you with your finances. And so that individual may or may not have any information about the finances. So again, you have to say with your physician that finances can be an issue during treatment. We hear anecdotally that patients are afraid to express that for fear that they will not be getting the full treatment as prescribed. The next one is the inability to identify financial resources. So Pink Fund, we're the only national organization that, as far as we know, that provides the amount and duration of support to patients. But there are many, many other statewide, local, and other national organizations that can help patients cobble together resources financially to help them get through that treatment time. And so that was the patients that, again, seek assistance outside of medicine through friends and philanthropic organizations. And the last one is lack of support in navigating the healthcare system. Some healthcare systems, particularly in the community oncology setting, don't often have financial or patient navigators. And that is really difficult. What we know is that patients trust patients more than they trust people in the provider setting. And there are many online groups that are private that you can join to get information and advice. Next slide. So we put together a guide to financially navigating breast cancer. We're happy to send this out to you. You can find it on our website, pinkfund.org. It tells you in plain language what to ask. Often patients are a little reticent or concerned about how to form a question. They're afraid they might insult their care team. So we just tell you exactly what questions to ask in the beginning. And then, why does it say verifying Grammarly on my desk? That's weird. So then know your care team. Go to the social worker in the hospital. Look for the patient and nurse navigator, and again, the financial counselor, and stay informed. Now, many people in treatment for breast cancer, as Tori mentioned, are completely overwhelmed. They shut down emotionally and mentally. So I remember Dr. Love talking about taking your best badass advocate with you to treatment, right? That person who is not going to stop asking questions on your behalf. That takes you out of that scenario where you feel you might insult the physician and lets your friend or family member take on that burden. So how does Pink Fund help? Next slide. Our Financial Bridge program is a 90-day grant program that will provide up to $3,000 of financial assistance over the course of up to 3 months. And now these bills for housing, which would be mortgage or rent, transportation, which would be car insurance, and any utilities or health insurance premiums will be paid directly to your creditors. That is a wonderful thing. It allows us to track exactly where the money goes, and you don't have to worry about any financial burdens and any money coming in or out of your bank account. Then we have a fund for metastatic breast cancer. So just so you know, on average, treatment for early stage breast cancer might have up to $61,000 over to $97,000 in out-of-pocket treatment costs. Patients with much later grades of disease, especially metastatic, treatment really never stops. So this fund is specific. It covers up to 6 months, $6,000 in bill payments for patients who have been approved for Social Security disability, but are in the mandatory 5-month waiting period where they can show no working income. Also, I want to say that our Financial Bridge program also covers treatment, including clinical trials. So if you're on a clinical trial, you would qualify. So the next one is our qualifications. Next slide. So patients must be actively undergoing treatment for breast cancer throughout funding. This includes, as I said earlier, clinical trial participation. The patient or spouse or domestic partner must have been working at the time of diagnosis and must be able to show a loss of working income. As I said earlier, we believe that it's really when that loss of working income impacts the ability of the family to make their basic cost of living bills, that then changes everything, because you can negotiate your insurance. Dan will talk to you about that, but you cannot negotiate your mortgage payment. The household income must be at or below 500% of the federal poverty level. That chart is on our website, and we'll show it to you next. The beauty of that is it allows us to rope in people in the middle class and certain zip codes that might be knocked out because of their income. So we know there are many resources for people with very, very low household incomes, but not so much for the middle class. And then we require supporting documentation. So those are things like tax returns, bank statements, the fact that you note that you're in active treatment. And all that information is on the website at pinkfund.org under Get Help. Next slide. So this is just really quick. You can see these income levels are fairly robust. We adjust them obviously every year along with the cost of living increase. And that, again, as I said, is on the website. We'll go to the application process next. So the first thing is to review the qualifications on the website and determine whether you fall into our 90-day financial bridge program or the Mary Herzog Fund. Fill out the pre-qualified form and you will receive an email, and by your application will come to you by email. You'll download it, print it, and fill out the application. You mail it in with the supporting documents. The day we get it, we send you an email notifying you that we have received your application and it is going into review. Application review takes 1 to 2 days. If you are missing supporting documentation, you will receive email from Grants at the Pink Fund asking you for all those specific missing documents. Once the application is complete, it goes to committee. Committee meets the second Monday of every month, and the following Tuesday, the applicant is notified of the funding decisions, including specifically what bills will be paid. Next slide. So as Michelle said earlier, we paid out close to $7 million. Basically now we're doing about $100,000 a month. We've seen a 53% increase in requests for help, and we hope to receive more funding so we can increase our monthly stipend that goes out. And then we're just going to go over some financial assistance by category. That's the next slide. So patients are most worried about keeping that roof over their head. I certainly was. My home did go into foreclosure. Fortunately, I was able to borrow money from my mother to rescue it, but we were really looking at homelessness. And had our home gone into foreclosure, we probably wouldn't have been eligible to rent an apartment because our credit report would have been affected and I lost my job. So that is the most crucial thing that people are concerned about. After that, transportation is a huge challenge for patients in our country to get to and from treatment. So making that car payment so it's not repossessed. And by the way, I was threatened with repossession every 58 days. Fortunately, my creditor took sympathy on me and did an 8-month workout, and I didn't lose my vehicle. Health insurance premiums are key, particularly for those who are on COBRA. Sometimes if you're on an FMLA from your employer, you have to pick up your premiums. Dan would know more about that than I do. And then utilities. We feel one of the most important utilities not to lose is really that cell phone bill, because that cell phone bill is everything. You've got everything in the palm of your hand that keeps your life going. So that is included. Next slide. So it's interesting for people to see how we fund. And all these things are self-identified. So you'll notice that 41% here of applicants don't specify their ethnicity. And we're concerned about that only because we wonder if they think they won't get funded. We only keep these numbers for potential funders who ask for this documentation. It does not affect whether we will fund you or not, but it is just information for foundation funding, especially when we're looked at, are we providing support to a diverse population? Our fiscal year recipients by age, the highest percentage is pretty low in terms of age, 40 to 49% women and some men. So that tells us that we're seeing younger and younger people being diagnosed and asking for support. Younger people and people over 65 are most at risk for financial toxicity because they're either living on a fixed income if they're over 65, and if they're younger, they haven't had time to build up their savings. They're maybe paying off college debt. They may have bought their first home, and they have young families. So they're both equally vulnerable populations. Next slide. So these are the reported self-income levels and education levels. And again, this is just data so that we have, and we know what we're looking at, and it helps us understand what certain populations may be experiencing. So basically, if you look at that 45% of those household incomes, it's very low, 25 to 50K a year, and only 9% is 75 to 100K per year. Interestingly enough, the majority of people we help only have a high school diploma, so they might not be working at jobs where they even have FMLA benefit. And so for them, they may lose their job altogether, which puts them even at greater risk. Next slide. So this is just a testimonial. I'll read it quickly. This person was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer past June. That was June of 2022. Had to stop working, didn't know how she was going to pay her bills. We stepped in and eased the burden. We were able to cover house and car payment for a month. I suspect that her house payment and car payment probably added up to $3,000. And she was very, very grateful. We know that while we can talk all day long about how many house payments we make, car payments, utilities, transportation, this is where the impact is made for us and why we keep doing what we're doing, because we know that we not only help with the financial health of the family, we help with the mental and emotional health as well as treatment adherence. And the next slide. So this is, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer at just 29. As a mother, wife, active registered nurse, and personal trainer, my life was completely put on hold. And that's what we talked about. Tori, you mentioned that too. Everything kind of, you have to concentrate on treatment, and some of their financial stuff, which you need to address, you kind of ignore. And that is not good. And that's why organizations like Pink Fund are out there to help ease some of that burden. I do want to say, and this is all on our website, and you can look at it later, but I do want to say it's really important to access as many organizations as possible, and your social worker or navigator may be able to help you do that. And think of it this way: when people apply to college, they don't just go for one scholarship, they go for multiple scholarships. And that's what we want you to do. While we believe that we provide the most amount and duration of support, we want you to get all the support you need. And we do refer you to Cancer Care, which is on our website, and they have a list of other funding organizations. We do not have a robust list of other funding organizations, primarily because we don't want to be sending you down multiple rabbit holes. Some of these organizations have open and closed funding, so you get to their website and you find out they don't have anything available for 90 days. And that's very stressful for people. So again, sometimes the social worker can do that work for you, and that would be ideal, and you should ask. And Tori talked a little bit about shame and embarrassment. I have to tell you that the most humiliating time in my life for somebody who did have a college education was standing in line at a food bank. But I was so grateful for that. And I think you need to take advantage of every resource that's available to you, even if you have to get source food from a local food bank. And I would highly recommend that. And I think that is the last slide, except for, well, there's one more there's one more. And this is from a social worker here at a National Cancer Institute in Michigan. And if you can get to that one. So the important part is that the social workers are also very grateful for the work that we do. So this woman was living with her grandson during her treatment, and we made it a little easier. Her life was just a little easier because of our support. And then finally, if you'd like to reach out to me, I'm Molly with a Y at thepinkfund.org.
Thank you so much, Molly. That was very helpful, and it's incredible that the Pink Fund provides all of these resources to patients undergoing treatment. So thank you so much for being with us. And next, I'd like to introduce Dan. Dan Sherman is the founder and president of NaVectis and is an expert in clinical navigation with over 18 years worth of experience assisting cancer programs with implementation of financial navigation programs. Dan created and implemented the financial navigation program at the Lax Cancer Center in 2009 and has been recognized by the Oncology Roundtable in 2012 and Cancer Patient Financial Navigation Program Pays Off. Dan has a LPC license in Michigan, and his education includes a MA in counseling from Liberty University and a BA in psychology from Cornerstone University. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dan.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate the introduction here. And let me just start off with saying thank you to both Tori and Molly. The comments that you guys have made are right on. Tori, your comments about the psychological trauma that a lot of our patients are experiencing because of the financial distress is something I'm going to have to admit that the medical setting has not really been paying well attention to, and we need to. And we're starting to become aware of the trauma and the stress that our patients are experiencing. We have a ways to go, but thank you for making that comment. And also what both Molly and Tori referred to is in some ways normalization of this experience of financial toxicity. There are studies out there that show that up to 70% of cancer patients express financial distress. And so this is not a problem that only a few of us are dealing with. It's a majority of our patient population. And let me point out that hospital settings are starting to hire full-time employees, full-time financial navigators, full-time financial advocates to address this problem. And so you're not alone. There are many patients out there that are needing the help. So I want to echo what's already been said, which is please speak up and talk to your team about the need for financial assistance. So let me just briefly talk about some different approaches that can be done to alleviate the financial burden when it comes to access to care. In general, there's going to be three different approaches that can be taken. And sometimes you can use a combination of all three. The first one here is what I would typically refer to as internal resources, meaning that there's resources within the the hospital setting or the provider setting of helping people get set up for these programs. One of them is going to be like a charity program, a hospital charity program. So most hospitals, certainly all non-for-profit hospitals, have charity programs available. And those guidelines are going to vary depending upon what state you're in and what specific hospital you're in. But you can fall anywhere below either 400% of the federal poverty level, sometimes it's 200% of the federal poverty level, and qualify for full write-offs of all of your medical bills in that hospital setting. The other thing that hospitals and providers are fairly good at doing is helping people enroll into Medicaid. Now, only about 20% of the patient population is going to qualify for Medicaid due to income guidelines. But if you fall into that category, that would be obviously extremely helpful because you will no longer have any medical bills if you qualify for that. And I also want to point out that there is a separate type of Medicaid program out there called the Breast and Cervical Cancer Control Program. Now, this name varies on which state you're in, but every single state has this. And in some states, there are no income criteria for it, meaning that if you have breast cancer or cervical cancer and you have no insurance, or you've lost your insurance due to maybe losing your job due to your illness and something like that, you can get enrolled into the Breast and Cervical Cancer Control Program and then have full coverage for your medical care. And once again, some states, Pennsylvania, Arizona, they have no income criteria for it. Most states, you have to fall below 250% of the federal poverty level.
Right.
Then there's another category here called that's where financial advocates get involved, and I call these external assistance programs. So programs like Molly's, the Pink Fund, where they will come in and help with some expenses that the patient has, the mortgage and car payments and stuff like that. But then there's other types of external assistance programs that might help with specific pharmaceutical interventions that you might have. So copay assistance programs and patient assistance programs. If you have commercial insurance, then if you're on a brand name medication, then usually, I would say at least 90% of the time, that pharmaceutical company will have a copay card available for you. And many of those copay programs do not have income requirements, meaning that anybody who applies for it would qualify for it, and they would pay your copays for that specific medication. And then there's foundations, there's copay assistance foundations out there to help patients who have Medicare and have large out-of-pocket responsibilities for their infusion services. But I'm going to add a third category here, which is kind of more new to the medical setting, and that's something that I call financial navigation services. And what this tries to do is that rather than just trying to treat the symptoms of financial toxicity, the symptoms of having high out-of-pockets or loss of income, it's taking a look at, well, can we cure this problem from an access to care standpoint? And as Tori mentioned, like really understanding your health insurance. And then I'm going to add in here, is there a way to improve your insurance through something that's called insurance optimization? If you can go to the next slide. I'm going to give an example of what this means. So here's a 67-year-old married female with a new diagnosis of breast cancer. Monthly household gross income is $1,680 a month, and they have $22,000 in assets. And she has Medicare A, B only. So when you have Medicare A and B only, or the Medicare population here, that means that you have an unlimited 20% responsibility for your care. There is no max out of pocket. This goes on. And she doesn't have Part D coverage. She needs surgery followed by biologic therapy. So we estimated the full cost of treatment for this lady was going to be $320,000 after the Medicare allowable, and then her 20% responsibility, she was going to owe $44,000 for her care. Obviously, that's not possible for her to pay. We can certainly try to enroll her into a copay assistance foundation, but after her first treatment, she would run out of money and still be in financial despair. So is there a way to fix this, right? It's April, it's not open enrollment for Medicare to sign up for some type of a Medicare plan. But I'm going to argue that for at least 30% of the Medicare population, you can actually sign up for a plan anytime during the year. So if you want to go to the next slide, there is a program called low income subsidy. This fixes Medicare Part D. It's kind of like Medicaid for Medicare Part D. It's run through the Social Security Administration. So individuals who fall below 150% of the federal poverty level, which nationally 30% of all Medicare beneficiaries fall into this category, they qualify for low income subsidy. And now all of a sudden your copays for all of your oral medications go way down in price. You can see some of the copay responsibilities here. If you want to move to the next slide, there is an additional benefit to the low income subsidy, and that is that if you do qualify for low income subsidy, you can sign up for a Medicare Advantage plan anytime during the year. So it's April, it's not open enrollment for Medicare, but she can enroll into this Medicare plan. This plan, I've just randomly picked one, has a max out of pocket of $3,450, and I'm going to argue that that is a lot better than owing $44,000 for your care. Now we can still, if there is a copay assistance foundation open, maybe she could get a $5,000 grant from Cancer Care or Healthwell Foundation, Patient Access Network, that could help with that remaining $3,450 out of network, in network out of pocket responsibility. Let's move to the next slide. There is also another rule in Medicare. I don't know if you guys have heard of this before, but there in the Medicare Advantage system, there's something called a star rating. The federal government rates these plans and gives them a star rating. If a Medicare Advantage plan is available in your town or in your county, and it's been rated 5 stars by the federal government, then you can enroll into this 5-star rated plan anytime during the year. So once again, if you have Medicare A and B only, or if you have a very large out-of-pocket responsibility with your current Medicare Advantage plan, you can sign up for a 5-star rated plan. This plan happens to have a $4,500 max out-of-pocket. Once again, much better than $4,500. So I'm going to echo here again the comments that Tori made, which is understand your health insurance. And if you don't understand it, which probably 90% of the American population don't, I would argue that it would be extremely wise for you to search out if your hospital system, if your provider has a financial navigator, go and ask questions. Are there opportunities for you to improve your coverage? This is just one example. There's hundreds of examples of being able to improve your coverage for certain patient populations. And if your hospital system doesn't have one, then try to search out a trusted local health insurance agent that might be able to guide you through this program, through this process as well. One more resource that if you can't find a trusted health insurance agent, every single state has a program called SHIP, State Health Insurance Assistance Program. If you Google that, SHIP, and then type in Medicare and then type in your state, you will find your local SHIP program, and they can also help navigate you through some of these processes. So I think that was the last slide. You can move on to the next one, I think, but I think that was my talking points here.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan. That was very helpful in kind of dissecting how someone can get further assistance through Medicare and other resources available. So we do have quite a few questions that have been submitted. We have a couple that were submitted beforehand. One of the questions was, who can qualify for assistance? I know Molly talked about income levels, but for assistance at the Pink Fund, for example, who can qualify for that and other assistance resources in the country?
So the challenge is that every nonprofit that provides financial assistance has different criteria for qualifying. My big goal would be to have what's a common app, like a site like they have for applying for college, where we could go in and all these charities would have to agree on maybe 3 qualifiers. So our qualifiers are that federal poverty level number, which must be documented with a tax return. The other one is that you're in active treatment and that there's maybe been a loss of household income. Our board is looking at changing some of those criteria to make it easier. By the way, Dan sits on our board and he will be helping to make those decisions, because we realize that our application process is burdensome for some patients and their families. And so we're trying to determine what we can remove and still have supporting documentation to ensure that we are helping people who are actively in cancer treatment. So that's it, active treatment, federal poverty level, loss of household income.
Yeah, and so from government-related programs, then usually they have some more strict income guidelines and asset guidelines. But for the external assistance programs like Molly's or COPI assistance foundations, they tend to hover in the 400% to 500% of the fellow poly level, which approximately 80% of the American population falls into that category. So the majority of people would qualify. And then if you have commercial insurance and there's a copay card available, then some of them do have income criteria, but they're very generous, and some of them don't even have any income criteria. So yeah, please don't assume that you would not qualify for assistance. Please ask, because the majority of people will qualify for something.
Great, that's really helpful to know. And thank you for that kind of notice that you're changing the Pink Fund application, Molly, because one of our participants mentioned that it has been burdensome for them, or he or she, to pull together the income documents while navigating their current diagnosis.
Yeah, I do have to say we will require a tax return. That's the only way we can document their income level. And we have a responsibility to steward our donor dollar, right, correctly to the right people. And so without that supporting documentation, we're working blindly. And that's why we do it.
Oh, absolutely. One of the other questions that came in was someone had asked about repairs on their home. So I know the Pink Fund covers basic living expenses. So my understanding was that it would cover your mortgage and your rent, but what if something were to happen to your home? Fire damage, flood damage, storm damage, something along those lines.
So some of that would be covered by your homeowner's insurance, and other parts of it would be covered by government programs, particularly when there's a natural disaster like floods, hurricanes, tornadoes. Here in Michigan, there's an organization called New Day Foundation for Families that will help with some of those unexpected expenses, but I don't know of any nationally that do that at all.
Like assistance with their deductible. So, their homeowner's insurance would cover the majority of the costs, but the deductible could be high.
It could be, and I wish I had a resource for that, but I don't. Sometimes, and I don't know if you can negotiate that. I know when I was in active treatment, I negotiated my deductible. I couldn't pay it because I didn't have a job. And so I made a payment arrangement with the provider and paid it off in 3 years.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo this as well, that from my expertise here, which is access to medical care, there's going to be very few programs that would be able to assist directly with those things, but then you can try to find it through indirect ways of if they have breast cancer and there's a decrease of income, well, then apply for the Pink Fund and get assistance on your mortgage so that you can can afford your deductible and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I will say something, I don't know how it works with Komen, but they will put either $300 or $500 directly into a patient's bank account. I don't know what their criteria is exactly for qualifying, but if that was the case, then I assume that money could be used at the patient's discretion, but I don't know.
And I
So
guess
that's the challenge. I'm sorry, so many different organizations have different ways of managing this.
Right. Go ahead.
And I can speak to the direct financial side. I know post-COVID, a lot of companies have rules in place that if you call and you say, I'm going through a financially difficult time, they will be more flexible with you, whether that is student loan payments, car payments, mortgages, rent. People are much more flexible, especially after, we had such an economic kind of downturn or shift during COVID. So if you're, willing to be vulnerable and call and explain your reasoning, you can negotiate almost all of your bills, your cable bill, your cell phone bill, or at least get you on some sort of, payment plan, especially for debt where maybe there's a period of time where, it's 0% interest for 6 months or a year. So know that that's available to anybody going through some sort of life or financial shift.
And that just reminds me of Green Path Financial, a national nonprofit that will help negotiate your credit card bills for you and get that interest down to zero, provided you make and keep a payment plan with them. They'll also put together a financial plan for you at no cost to you. So they'll do kind of a financial analysis of your financial health. And so I really recommend them. That's greenpathfinancial.org.
Okay, great. That's a great tip. Someone had another question, but it seems to veer more into the public policy space, which we don't really do as an organization. However, if the three of you have any resources to direct this particular question, this person was asking about, our insurance and healthcare system is quite controversial in this country. And we as an organization don't do any public policy work around this, but I don't know if you, Molly, as an organization, does public policy work around it, or Tori or Dan, if there are some organizations that you could direct this person to get involved in, to reach out to their representative, etc.
Yeah, a huge part of my work personally is the realization that personal finance is about 80% circumstances and 20% your personal choices. And this is a very similar thing with healthcare. It's about 20% your ability to navigate this and your ability to pay as an individual, but really, 80, even 90% is about how our healthcare system is incredibly expensive, does not support individuals, and specifically anybody who is not a cisgendered straight white man, right, has a lot more barriers and hoops to jump through. This is the classic thing where we can't solve inequality overnight, right? But what we can do is we can call our legislators to support the kind of, legislation that we want to see. And for us at Her First 100K and with my work, like so much of our influence is yes, teaching people how to manage money, but also advocating for broader policy change that we know is much more impactful on people's day-to-day than their ability to pay off debt or ability to budget. So know that I see this person, I see you, and I agree with you. There's so much focus, I think, on the individual level. And that is great and helpful information. But of course, there needs to be wide sweeping policy change to be able to support individuals who are sick or who are advocating for those who are sick or ill.
And oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was just going to add in here that every single state has something called a state oncology society. And so the State Oncology Society works very closely with the legislation and doing advocacy work there. So if there's specific policy issues that you're concerned about from an oncology standpoint, that would be a good place to start. If you don't know who your state society is, I would just Google, Michigan State Oncology Society, and you'll find it up there. And then contact them via that way.
So I sit on the board of the National Breast Cancer Coalition, and we are an advocacy organization. They are working now toward eliminating that 5-month wait period for metastatic patients to get on SSDI, and some other potential things. You can look at nationalbreastcancercoalition.org and find out what their legislative priorities are, and you can get involved as an advocate. The nice thing about that coalition is that they have various nonprofits from all over the United States who are engaged in this process. We have a lobby day coming up next month in DC, where we will be lobbying for some of those legislative issues.
Thanks, Molly. Yeah, NBCC is very active within the public policy space around treatments and new legislation for breast cancer. And so they're great resources for that. Beyond living expenses around, transportation, housing, insurance payments, what about some other expenses like childcare, housekeeping, gardening, those types of things when someone is undergoing treatment, especially if you are a single parent, whether you're a female or male, and you're in the middle of treatment, you don't have the ability to do all these other things that are part of the household. Do you know of any other resources available to support that?
So there's Cleaning for a Reason. I think they're still around. I don't know if they're as robust as they used to be. Unfortunately, the only resource I know for child care support is only in Canada, and it's the Nanny Angel Network, I believe. But there might be something here in the States. I've always felt that the provider setting should have childcare on site.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many things that I also feel employers should have childcare on site. I think that there are many things we can do as a country to mitigate some of these burdens that mothers and fathers have around work and any kind of healthcare challenge that they're facing. But right now that doesn't happen. I know my provider did have an on-site daycare for their employees, but not for patients.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of things have come to light as a result of COVID of how much mothers need support in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all of our questions. I would like to give you each an opportunity to plug your resources, your websites, your IG. I love following Tori on TikTok personally, where to buy her book, etc. Along with the book, please be on the lookout for an email from me. The first 50 registrants will receive a free copy of Tori's book, and I'll need to get your addresses. So I'll be sending an email later today to capture those addresses to get the book out to you. I have a copy and I love it. It's a wonderful resource. So Tori, why don't you start?
Thank you. And thanks for having me. I am Her First 100K on all the socials, or herfirst100k.com. Financial Feminist is the book and podcast.
Thank you. And Molly, obviously the Pink Fund, but if people have questions for you specifically.
So you can, any questions around applications, go to grants, grants, at thepinkfund.org. All our communication is done by email for the purpose of tracking and clarity. We used to take phone calls. We don't do that anymore because patients were in a crisis mode, and we actually had somebody threatening to take her life if we didn't help her. So we were advised to go strictly to email communication. On our website, you can just click on Get Help. You can pre-qualify. There are also what I call explainer videos around the application. And you can register for a monthly newsletter, at which time, some point, you might see that the application process has changed, although we don't think that will happen for about 3 to 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Molly. And Dan?
Yeah, so my role in all of this is that I provide training to oncology providers and how to implement financial navigation services in those settings, so either a hospital setting or a private practice. And so if you're finding that your provider just does not do a good job in regards to addressing this issue, they can contact me if they're interested in training. My contact information is Dan Sherman at NaVectis.com, NaVectis.com.
Great, thank you. And I will send out all these resources with a follow-up email. So I would just like to thank you to our panelists again for joining us today and for presenting such helpful information. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. If you have any questions that weren't answered and you would like one of the panelists to answer them, please feel free to email us at info@drsusanloveresearch.org, and we'll be sure to pass it along to get your question answered. The webinar has been recorded and it will be uploaded to our website by tomorrow, where you can share it or review it later at your convenience. And I also encourage you to visit our website, drsusanloveresearch.org, for more resources around research and support for the breast cancer community. And thank you so much for all of you for joining in from around the country. I hope you are all staying safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.